As much as I despise Donald Trump, back in October, he did say that Congress should approve a second $1,200 relief payment to Americans. Now, it's true that he reversed course from saying that he wanted to wait until after the election, that he was sure he'd win before another relief bill was passed. Nevertheless, he did say via his official means of communication, Twitter, that he would approve another round of relief payments to citizens. And to be fair, it is also true that he wanted $25 billion to bail out the airline industry and $135 billion for the Paycheck Protection Program, a second round of assistance to those industries that already got trillions of dollars, but haven't seemed to save many people's paychecks, considering how many people have been laid off and have filed for unemployment. But it is absolutely true that Trump wanted you and I to get another $1,200 check before the end of the year. Back then, the coronavirus relief bill submitted by the Democrats was $2.2 trillion with a T. Trump said that he'd approve $1.6 trillion of that money, which would have included the $1,200 relief check. Well, now Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are celebrating their bipartisan effort to leave you and me hanging. Of this ridiculous capitulation to the Scrooge-like Republicans' relief bill, Pelosi said, quote, "In the spirit of compromise, we believe the bipartisan framework included by senators should be used as the basis for immediate bipartisan bicameral negotiations. Of course, we and others will offer improvements, but the need to act is immediate, and we believe that with good faith negotiations, we could come to an agreement." Let me tell you what this bipartisan legislation includes. $300 in weekly federal unemployment benefits for 18 weeks. That's half of what was previously agreed upon. $288 billion in fresh funding for the Paycheck Protection Small Business Loan Program, and $16 billion for testing and vaccine distribution. All told, $908 billion in legislative relief. It also includes a temporary block on pandemic-related lawsuits to allow states to craft their own policies on legal liability. But the Senate Republicans don't even want that. Their bill will cost roughly $500 billion. And guess what? Neither one of these pieces of legislation includes a direct payment to the people. This political gambit that the House Democratic leadership played with our money, because that's all this was, a gambit by Pelosi and team who didn't want to give Trump a win in saying that he was the one who got another relief check to the people and banked on the Democrats having leverage to steamroll the Republicans into accepting their bill after the election. They should really all lose their jobs in their next elections. And I can understand not wanting to give Trump another talking point to crow endlessly about, but rather than accurately point out that had the Trump administration responded to the pandemic with widespread delivery of PPE and clear guidance from the top in the beginning, rather than the lies and the stirring up of the GOP base to defy basic safety measures that Trump actually did, often violently, Pelosi and Schumer passed on getting desperately needed relief to millions of Americans so that they could say they won some kind of political battle. Meanwhile, they say and do nothing about the working class and poor who were forced to go to work in the midst of the pandemic, in the midst of anti-lockdown protests with no PPE to protect themselves and no support from companies or the government through any of it, except for some cheesy heroes work here banners and maybe a free cup of coffee at McDonald's, but only if they were a healthcare worker, because you weren't a hero if you worked at McDonald's or Burger King or a grocery store or Amazon or Walmart during this pandemic. Those people couldn't get a free cup of anything for their heroic service. And thanks to the Democrats and their horrible political strategy, they still won't. Now, I watched a little bit of the debate between Georgia GOP stand-in Senator Kelly Loeffler and Democratic hopeful Raphael Warnock, and I really got angry all over again over Warnock's walking back of his support for BDS. Now, what I'm thinking more about now, though, is why this fight against another apartheid regime is so different from the first one. See, back when the original BDS movement against apartheid South Africa was fought, I remember being involved in teach-ins and demonstrations organized by political groups across the social spectrum, from the punk community that I was deeply immersed in to college campus groups that often intersected with us punks, and most notably from groups organized by Black people within politics and without. From small Black church groups to organizations like Trans Africa, I remember Black people being largely supportive of and very outspoken in denouncing the racist oppression of the white minority South African government against the indigenous and majority Black African population. Anti-apartheid movies, news reports, and even songs and celebrity activism were prominent throughout the 80s as Ronald Reagan and his buddy, UK Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, were basically the lone holdouts in practically the whole developed world in imposing sanctions on the violently racist government of South Africa and in pressuring F.W. de Klerk to dismantle apartheid. The BDS movement against South Africa was born in the UK and existed there for nearly a decade before it made its way here, largely because the U.S. didn't rely on exports of major goods from South Africa the way the UK did, but the opposition to the racial injustice of apartheid would not have been successful without the support of the U.S. entering the global fight against it. And the U.S. wouldn't have been as important a factor as it was without the near unanimous chorus of Black dissent propelling it into the fight. Sadly, this iteration of BDS does not feel the same to me, and I posit that it is largely because of the ideological disconnection of Black Americans from the struggle against the apartheid policies being committed against the Palestinians by the Israeli government. Black people have been conditioned not to see Palestinians as related to us. So their struggle for liberation is not the same as ours. That's what we're taught. And it's something we don't have to concern ourselves with. The literal whitewashing of the Christian religion and the rise of the politically conservative religious lobby, the cowardice of the U.S. media that used to openly question Israeli government atrocities committed against the Palestinians, the widespread acceptance of endless war in the Middle East region that the U.S. helped to destabilize, and the ever-worsening economic condition in the U.S. of Black people have all contributed to cause people who have historically understood that the international struggle for liberation of all oppressed people to be inherently connected to our struggle for liberation here. We've been conditioned to believe that our problems are too big for us to worry about anybody else's problems in another country. But this is intentional, because the struggle for liberation against the global imperialism that our tax dollars literally pay for can never take root in this country again, because it was simply too successful the last time it did. And that is the proof that we need to let us know that we can indeed win again. Follow Luqman Nation on patreon.com/LuqmanNation for lots of great content.